December 20th, 1944, Luxembourg City, 3rd Army Headquarters. The side door opened and 2 MPs walked in with a German officer cuffed between them. SS-Sturmbannführer Heinrich Krüger, 34 years old, Cambridge educated, captured at dawn in a skirmish near the Sauer River. His field-gray tunic still carried the mud of a Belgian ditch, and his right cheek was scraped raw from the fall that had ended his fight. But his posture was rigid, his chin was raised, and his eyes were already moving across the maps pinned to the walls, measuring, cataloging, the way an officer cases a room before he speaks. At the long oak desk in the center of the floor, General George S. Patton looked up from a stack of intelligence reports and a half-finished cigar. He did not stand. He didn't greet the prisoner. He studied him for a long moment the way a horseman studies an unfamiliar animal, looking for the tell, the place where the bearing comes apart. He found it almost at once. The shoulders were rigid. The breathing was not. Krüger was holding his body the way a man holds it when he has been rehearsing what he plans to say. Patton waited for him to say it. Krüger did not wait to be addressed. In flawless English, looking directly at the man who commanded the 3rd Army of the United States, he said it, the threat, and the headquarters went silent. "Your 3rd Army is encircled, General. The Führer's counteroffensive will smash you within the week. Surrender now, or your men will freeze in these forests the way Napoleon's Grande Armée froze in Russia." The first escalation came from the corner of the room. Sergeant of the Guard, an MP named Riley, Brooklyn-born, 23 years old, his right hand already on the grip of his Colt. "Sir," he said. His voice was tight, the kind of tight that was already asking permission. "I can have him outside in 30 seconds. Patton did not turn his head. Riley's hand stayed on the Colt and did not move. Then the second shift. Colonel Oscar Koch, the 3rd Army's chief intelligence officer, looked up from a situation map he had been redrawing for 3 hours and saw what was happening. Koch had been awake since the previous afternoon. He understood, faster than anyone else in the room, what Krüger had just made of this moment. This was no longer an interrogation. The prisoner had turned it into a public test. Every officer in the headquarters was now watching the man behind the desk, waiting to see whether George Patton would flinch in his own command post during the worst week of the European war. Then the third. General Hobart Gay, Patton's chief of staff, set the radio handset down mid-call. The radio operator stopped relaying coordinates. The typewriters in the next room died one by one. Whatever happened in the next 60 seconds would travel. It would reach every battalion of the 3rd Army before midnight, and from the 3rd Army it would reach the Germans in the line opposite them by morning. If Patton blinked, the men freezing in the Ardennes would feel it the next day. Patton still had not moved. What he did in the next 60 seconds would either prove the rumor the Germans were already telling themselves, that American command was fracturing under the weight of the offensive, or it would lock the tone of the boldest counterattack in the entire war. On this channel, we tell the World War II stories where the hardest decisions weren't made on the battlefield. They were made in rooms exactly like this one. If that's the kind of history you want more of, hit subscribe. 4 days earlier, on December 16th, the Germans had punched through the Ardennes in fog so thick the American Air Force had not gotten off the ground in a week. Whole regiments had been overrun in the first 36 hours. The 101st Airborne was dug in around the town of Bastogne, surrounded on every side, low on ammunition, low on food, and refusing, in a single profane word, to surrender. Patton had done what no other general at the Verdun conference had said was possible. He had wheeled his entire 3rd Army 90 degrees in 48 hours and driven it north into the German flank. When Eisenhower had asked him at Verdun how long it would take to get an attack moving, Patton had answered, in front of the entire Allied command, that he could do it in 2 days. Half the room had thought he was lying. The other half had thought he was insane. He was now 4 days into proving them both wrong. As of dawn on the 20th, his lead armor was 12 miles south of Bastogne and pushing. His Luxembourg headquarters was the nerve center of an army moving faster than the enemy believed it could. And into that nerve center had just walked a man in handcuffs who believed the uniform on his back could still command a room. Patton was capable of being surprised. He was not capable of being afraid. He stood. slowly. He walked around the desk, the leather of his boots loud on the floorboards in the silence Krüger had created. He stopped 3 feet from the prisoner and did the thing no one in the room expected. He smiled. Not warmly. It was the kind of smile a man wears when he has already decided how the conversation is going to end and is only waiting for the other person to catch up. "You speak English well," Patton said. His voice was quiet. "Cambridge. Before the war." "Cambridge," Patton nodded once. "An educated man, so you'll know a little history." Krüger's eyes narrowed. The smile had thrown him. "You mentioned Napoleon," Patton said. "The Grande Armée, interesting choice. Do you know why they froze?" "Because the Tsar burned everything they could eat." "No." Patton's voice did not rise. "They froze because Napoleon stayed too long. He thought one more victory would finish it. He thought the Russians were already broken. He was wrong about both, and his army left its bones in the snow from Smolensk to the Berezina." He let the sentence sit. "Your Führer is in a bunker right now drawing lines on a map. He believes he has already won this winter. He has not. He has just spent the last reserve of armor he had in the west on a single road junction, and he is not going to take it." Krüger's chin was still up. His jaw had tightened. Patton saw it. "You came into my headquarters," Patton continued, still quiet, "and you threatened me. You told me to surrender or watch my men die. Sturmbannführer, do you know what that tells me about your situation?" He did not wait for an answer. "It tells me you're losing. A winning army does not send its prisoners in with ultimatums. A winning army does not need to. It sends silence, and the silence does the work. You came in here loud because the men who sent you are out of ideas, and somewhere in a forward command post a colonel told you to deliver a speech because he had nothing left to deliver but a speech." He turned his head a fraction. "Colonel Koch, the map." Koch stepped forward without a word and laid the situation overlay on the desk. Patton tapped it twice. "Third Army elements as of 0600. We've put 42 miles of road behind us in 3 days. Lead tanks of the 4th Armored are 12 miles from Bastogne. The German divisions surrounding the 101st are now themselves under pressure on 3 sides, and they don't have the fuel to break contact." He looked back at Krüger. "Does that sound encircled to you, Sturmbannführer?" Krüger said nothing. "Major Stiller, weather." A staff officer stepped forward. "Sir, front is breaking. Clear skies by morning. First flyable day in over a week." Patton turned the words over once before he answered them. "That means our thunderbolts are off the ground at dawn. That means every truck, every Tiger, every supply column the Ardennes offensive depends on is going to spend the next 3 days burning on the road from Saint-Vite to the Hour." He stepped closer to Krüger, not menacing, just close. "You came here to make me afraid of the German army. You surprised us on the 16th, Sturmbannführer. I'll give you that. The fog was yours and the timing was yours and the first 36 hours were yours. But the German army has been pushed out of North Africa, out of Sicily, out of Italy, off the Normandy beaches, and it is about to be pushed out of Belgium. You picked the wrong week, and the wrong room, and the wrong general." Krüger tried once more. The pride in his voice was thinner now, but it was still there. "Your thunderbolts cannot break dug-in panzer divisions. Bastogne will fall before your armor reaches it." Patton did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Bastogne has not fallen for 6 days under everything your generals have thrown at it. It will not fall in the next 6 either. You are looking at a town defended by paratroopers who have been told they are surrounded and have answered in writing that they do not care. There is no German division in the Ardennes that frightens men like that. You should know. You were captured by them." Krüger opened his mouth, closed it. There was nothing in the room he could say that would land. He had walked in with the speech of a winning officer, and he was standing inside the consequences of the speech now, and he was not even allowed to take it back. The silence that had begun when he delivered the threat had not lifted. It had only gotten heavier, and now it belonged to him. Patton let it sit for one more long beat. He looked once at Koch. Koch met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. Confirmation of the numbers on the map, confirmation that what Patton was about to say was not bravado, but arithmetic. Patton turned back to Krüger. He walked back to the desk, picked up the cigar, rolled it between his fingers without lighting it. The The cigar had been sitting on the edge of the ashtray for 2 hours. He had not had time to smoke it. He was going to make time now. "I'm going to tell you exactly what is going to happen next," he said. "Within the week, my 4th Armored is going to break the ring around Bastogne. The 101st will be relieved. Your offensive will collapse on its own weight. Your Führer will lose the last operational reserve he had in this theater, and after that there will be nothing between this army and the Rhine but distance and bad weather. You," Patton said, "are going to spend the rest of this war in a prison camp listening to it happen on a radio. I'm going to make sure you get one." He turned to the MPS. "Get him out of here. Send him to the camp at Compiègne. Make sure his barracks has a working set. I want him to hear the news on the day it breaks." The MPs took Krüger's elbows. As they reached the door, Patton spoke once more quietly, almost to himself. "And when the news comes through, Sturmbannführer, listen to what happens in that barracks after the broadcast ends. Listen to the silence in the room. That silence is what losing sounds like." Krüger was led out. The door closed. The headquarters held its breath for a beat longer than it needed to, and then the radios came back on and the typewriters resumed and the war kept moving. General Gay was the first to speak. He kept his voice low. "Sir, within the week, to Bastogne." Patton lit the cigar. "We had better." A long, slow draw. "I just told the entire German army we would." The weather broke the next morning, exactly the way Major Stiller said it would, B-47. Thunderbolts came in low over the German supply roads on the 23rd, and they stayed there. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, 37th Tank Battalion, the spearhead of the 4th Armored, the same unit Patton had been pointing to on the map in Luxembourg, fought its way up through the village of Assenois on the afternoon of December 26th. At 1650 hours, Abrams's Sherman tanks rolled through the perimeter held by the 101st Airborne. The siege was broken. The 101st was relieved. The German offensive had spent its last reserve on a single road junction, and the junction was American again. The story reached every command in the European theater inside of hours. The story of what had been said in Luxembourg on December 20th reached the prison camps later. The American guards at the SS officers' compound at Compiègne made certain of it. They walked into the senior barracks on the evening of the 26th, they turned the radio up, and they did not turn it off until every man inside understood what he was hearing. Sturmbannführer Heinrich Krüger sat on the edge of a wooden bunk and listened to the BBC announcer read the bulletin twice. Around him, 6 other SS officers, colonels, majors, men who had drawn up the Ardennes plan or believed every word of it, sat without moving. No one spoke. No one cleared his throat. The radio hissed and was switched off, and the silence that followed was the silence Patton had told him to listen for. It went on a long time. Finally, one of the other officers, a colonel who had served under Sepp Dietrich in the 6th Panzer Army, turned his head. "You met with Patton during your interrogation. What did he say to you?" For a moment, Krüger did not answer. Then, very quietly, in the language no one else in the barracks shared with him, he answered in English. "He told me what was going to happen, and then he told me to listen to the room when it did." The colonel waited for the rest. There was no rest. Krüger sat in the silence of a barracks foyer of men who had built their lives around the conviction that they could not lose, and he listened to it, exactly as he had been told to. For the rest of his life he would remember the unhurried smile, the unlit cigar, and the silence in a Luxembourg room that had answered him before Patton ever opened his mouth. What do you think? Was Patton's quiet confidence justified, or did he gamble American lives on a promise he had no right to make in front of a prisoner? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more World War II stories about the moments that never made the textbooks, the ones decided in rooms instead of on battlefields, subscribe.